Hello, everybody. I'm Jacqueline Whitmore, and it's Tuesday at 2 p.m. And as always, I am hosting Ask the Etiquette Expert. I'm so glad you joined me. And for those of you who are new to my series, welcome. To those of you who are returning, welcome back. Today, I'm going to be talking about travel etiquette because spring is in the air and a lot of us are going on trips for spring break. We're visiting family, we're visiting friends, we're going to theme parks, but most of us are going to be getting on airplanes. And so, oftentimes, when we pack for a trip, we forget to pack our common sense and good manners. At least that's what I've experienced. I was a former flight attendant. I am a former flight attendant, and that's what some people don't know about me. I was a flight attendant for Northwest Airlines back in 1992, and I was based in Boston, and I only flew for 1 year. However, that year taught me an enormous amount about life and about different cultures. And in fact, that's where I believe I gained a better appreciation for different people of other cultures. And so whenever I'm called upon to talk about airplane etiquette, I always let the journalists know I was a former flight attendant. And that always brings a big happy surprise to their face because that adds credibility to their articles. And speaking of articles, I was recently featured today. And as a matter of fact, it came out on Fox News Digital, and you might have seen it on one of my social media pages. And last week, the editor contacted me and she asked me if I would send in my top 10 airplane etiquette tips. And normally, what I do in a situation like that is I just rattle off, here's my top 10 tips, one liners, and I send them off, and then I move on to my next project. But something compelled me to sit down on Sunday afternoon and actually think about each and every tip and embellish them and add to the tips more than I normally would add. And so I sent the tips off to her on Sunday afternoon, and here it is Tuesday, and the entire article, the article came out with my all not only 10 tips but 20 tips. So she was able to break down the tips into smaller segments. So I'm going to be talking to you about that today. And I'm just going to check if we have any comments. By the way, if you'd like to ask me a question, just go ahead and type it in the chat and I'll be able to see it in the comments section. And so I definitely encourage you to do that. And in the meantime, what I'll be doing is I'll be covering as many of these tips as I possibly can. And I have received a couple of questions about these tips. And it's interesting how this particular subject ignites a debate because there's something about airplane travel that really gets under our skin. So let's start with tip number one. Tip number one is if you bring food on board, and if you're smart, you will, don't bring anything with a highly identifiable or offensive odor. How many times have you gotten on a plane and not only do people bring on smelly foods with onion or garlic or fish, or maybe it's a pungent, spicy food. But I once boarded a plane and I fly a lot and I have flown a lot over the years. And I remember one particular flight where a woman brought out her nail polish and she started painting her nails. And when you are in a closed-in space like that, it can be extremely annoying. The smell just permeates throughout the plane. So that's my number one tip is if you're going to bring food on board, and I definitely recommend that you should because planes are cutting way back, then just make sure that it isn't highly aromatic, if you will. Okay, tip number 2, if you can't lift your own bag, don't bring it on. Stow it. So many times when I was a flight attendant, I would see parents walk on the plane and their strollers were as big as Mercedes Benz. I mean, they were humongous. And then being a flight attendant, we were oftentimes asked to help the passengers get their luggage up in the overhead bin. And now it seems like people want to cut corners and save money, so they don't want to pay for their extra bags. So what are they doing? They're bringing the extra bag onto the plane with them. When in actuality, you're supposed to bring one carry-on and one small personal belonging, usually a briefcase or a purse, handbag, or backpack, something small. But what we're finding now is people are bringing on 2 carry-ons, and that is definitely a no-no. So if you can't lift it, then stow it because you don't want to cause anybody else to pull a muscle or break their back. Tip number 3, wipe down the sink in the lavatory. This is something that a lot of people don't do, even in public restrooms. They don't take the time to just get a paper towel and after they've washed their hands to just wipe down the counter. And this is something that I learned from my mom when I was a little girl. It takes 2 seconds and it just leaves the restroom nicer for the next person who comes along. So don't treat it like your own restroom at home. Okay, number 4, if you have to swap seats with someone, swap seats with someone who's in a comparable seat. So let's say you want to save money and you buy the cheap seats, but your spouse or partner wants to splurge and they want to sit in business class or maybe economy comfort, but you and your kids are stuck in the back in steerage. What do? Do you ask the flight attendant if you can be moved? All 3 of you, you and your son and daughter, to go up to a more expensive seat? You'd be surprised how many people are actually brave enough to do that. And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. You don't do that. In other words, the person in the front would be better off coming to the back. But if you're going to ask for an aisle seat, make sure you trade an aisle seat for an aisle seat. Let's see. By the way, here's a little disclaimer or my little infomercial for you. I have a free ebook. It's called Master Your Mingle Ability. You can get it on my website, etiquetteexpert.com. All you do is click on the link and scroll all the way down to the bottom. And you'll see free ebook, Master Your Mingle Ability, and you just put in your email address and you'll get the downloadable version right away. So I encourage you to check that out. It's all about meeting, greeting, remembering names, networking, and learning how to interact with others and form better relationships. Okay, moving right along. By the way, I have really enjoyed getting your comments and your emails and your compliments. I really appreciate that. That makes me feel good. So thank you. Let's see here. Oh my goodness. I was just looking at this article on Fox News Digital. By the way, that's where the original article appeared. Let me give you the name of it. And I will also include a link to this article in the chat. It's titled Air Travel Made Better, 20 Rules of Airplane Etiquette No One Ever Tells You But Should. So that's what the article looks like. And let's see, let's go on and boy, we've already got over 1,000 comments on this one article alone, almost 2,000 comments. So that's unbelievable. That's how hot this topic is. Number 5, every passenger has the right to recline his or her seat. And I just got an email this morning from a man, and I want to read it to you. And I appreciate these emails, especially if they're kind. But let's see, is this the one about reclining? Okay, no, this is the man with the long legs. I'll save that for just a minute. Okay. He said, and by the way, this person's name is Chuck. So, Chuck, if you're watching, welcome. Hello. Chuck says, in the terms of carriage, reclining a seat is not guaranteed. Regarding reclining of a seat, in the terms of carriage, reclining a seat is not guaranteed. As a matter of fact, many seats don't recline. Okay. He says, as a business traveler for 30 years, I think it's rude to recline. I only recline if I'm sitting in a seat with a bulkhead behind me. Yes, I usually fly first class. And he goes on to say, I particularly like the don't expect others to lift your bag rule. Maybe I'm a jerk, but if you can't lift your bag, you should have checked it. I will never help someone who should have checked a bag. So thank you, Chuck, for those comments. But I guess he's agreeing with me on the checked baggage, and also he's disagreeing with me on the reclining of the seat. In fact, he doesn't think you should recline unless, of course, you're sleeping. And I have had other people say the same thing. So, what I believe is that I'm a recliner. I happen to like to recline my seat. But what I have found is that when you're eating a meal and you recline, it's an inconvenience for the other person. So pull your seat forward when you take off, when you land, and also when the meal comes out, because you don't want to break anybody's laptop, you don't want to spill their drink, and you definitely don't want to hurt their knees, especially if their knees are up in their under their chin anyway. And a lot of people have really long legs. Another rule that I talk about is controlling your children. And I understand if you're traveling with a very, very small child, an infant, that child definitely hasn't traveled a lot, or maybe that child has. But even if that child has, if it's a very small infant, that infant is apt to cry on takeoff and landing. And the reason is the pressure gets so intense for their ears. The baby doesn't know how to clear his or her ears. So actually the crying helps, because when the baby swallows, it helps to clear the ears. Whereas the rest of us, we're just plugging our nose and breathing out. And that's how we clear our ears. Another thing that would help, of course, if you bring a baby bottle with milk or water, and then I make a joke, of course, in the article, you can also use Benadryl. And staying in the same vein of children, what you might want to do is control your children. And I know a lot of parents, especially on longer flights, they oftentimes children want to get up, they want to run around, they're antsy, they want to jump in their seat. Well, that would be fine if no one is sitting in the front of you or the back of you. However, what I've found after flying for so many years is that if you have an unruly child, sometimes that child will bang his feet on the back of the seat, or he'll bang his hands on the tray table. And what that does is it causes a lot of friction with the person who's sitting in that seat that's being disturbed. So I'm often asked, well, what do you do in a situation like that when you have a child behind you and he or she is banging on your tray table? Well, I believe honesty is the best policy. And I also believe in being diplomatic. And if it's a first time occurrence, you can just simply just look around behind you and say something to the parent. Would you mind telling your child not to kick my seat? I'm trying to get some work done, or I'm trying to sleep. If the child continues to repeat the action, you might have to get a flight attendant involved. And I mean, no one wants to do that. So if you can handle it yourself in a nice, kind, diplomatic way, try it. But other times, sometimes you do have to get an authority involved. Speaking of flight attendants, be kind. Be kind to your flight attendant. Personally speaking, I know they don't make a lot of money. They are overworked, understaffed, and it's not a glamorous job. I used to say the glamour was literally underneath my fingernails. I mean, that it used to be and it still is a very dirty job. I mean, back in the days when I used to fly, we used to serve meals, real meals, beef and chicken, vegetarian meals. We used to carry those or push those carts up and down the aisle, and it was just constant. I mean, we just never got a break. And so I always suggest that you be kind to your flight attendant, because you just never know. You might get an upgrade. You might get an extra alcoholic beverage. You just never know. Plus, it's just the right thing to do. And I noticed one of the comments in the article here. Someone said, "Oh, the flight attendants are very surly. So why should I be kind if they're not kind?" Well, if you get a surly flight attendant, then you can take the high road and you can ignore that person, because once you stoop down to their level, now you've taken the low road too. So you don't necessarily have to fight fire with fire. In fact, you're probably never going to see that person again. So why stoop to that level? For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Jacqueline Whitmore, and I would love to get some of your questions and your comments. And if you do have a comment, oh, we've got a comment here. Let me just go online and see who we have. Okay. Diane, welcome. If you can't lift your bag up to the overhead bin, don't bring it on. So I hope you agree with me. Yeah. And Patsy, welcome. Patsy is joining us. She's from Lakeland, Florida. She happens to be a very dear friend of mine. We go back many, many years. I've known Patsy since 1973. Yes, that's showing my age. She's enjoying the segment. So thank you, Patsy, for joining me. And again, if you're new to the program and you'd like to comment on any of these etiquette tips, please do. I love to hear your comments. So, and of course, if you like this weekly show, share it with your friends. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if that's where you're watching it. Like it, if you will, and tell your friends about it. So anyway, so those are a few of the airplane etiquette tips. One other tip that I mentioned in this article is people who have to grab the headrest to get up and sit down. Well, what that often does is when you grab the headrest in front of you, you could also be grabbing somebody else's hair. Plus, it's shaking the other person, which is not very nice. And I've seen so many people just hang on to the headrests as they're making that long trek to the lavatory. And just try your best to leave the headrests alone. Speaking of the lavatory, the water you see on the floor is not water at all. So wear socks or slippers if you feel so inclined to take off your shoes on that plane. And I know on long flights we do like to take our shoes off, but no one wants to smell your feet. And never put your feet on the back of somebody else's chair. I mean, don't treat the plane like your own living room. This is a public space. Everybody has to get along. I know the seats are getting smaller and smaller. The spaces are getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So you definitely want to be respectful and keep your dirty feet off the back of the chair. Other body parts, your sharp elbows, your long legs, that can also be problematic if you keep your legs in the aisle. And I know those of you who are really tall, you like to get an aisle seat. I get that. But think about it. If your foot is in the aisle the whole entire time, maybe you're a tall person and you like to stretch out your legs. Who doesn't? You want to keep your body parts to yourself. So there was an article just yesterday on a website that I saw about talking about man spreading. Well, what is man spreading? That's when a man opens his knees all the way. And of course, oftentimes the knees will go into the neighbor's territory and it can cause a problem. And that's exactly what happened on this one particular flight in this article. The person was talking about, actually it was on Reddit is a place that you can air your grievances, and this one woman said this man was sitting in the middle seat, she was in the window seat, and he just started to spread out. Well, his knees were going over into her personal space. So instead of saying something kindly to this person, this man, what she did was she pressed her call button and she told the flight attendant about it, and then the flight attendant said something, and this obviously caused a big rift between this man and this woman, where she could have asked in the beginning when she first sat down, if she thought it might become a problem, she could have asked for another seat, of course in the comparable price range. She could have asked him kindly, but what she did was she got the flight attendant involved, and it just made for a very uncomfortable flight for the both of them. But back to the person with the very long legs. If you're sticking your leg out in the aisle, you have to be really careful, because if it's a night flight and people don't see very well, what's going to happen? Somebody could accidentally trip over your leg, and it really is a safety issue. And I know it's so hard for those of you who need that extra leg room. And if you feel like you need that extra leg room, then you should plan accordingly. You can ask a gate agent when you arrive. You can say, is it possible to be moved to another seat, or is there a economy comfort seat available? Oftentimes they'll just give them away at the last minute. Some people don't realize that if it's an extenuating circumstance. But of course you shouldn't use that as an excuse or to manipulate other people. But it does become a safety hazard. So this one person, let me read you this one particular comment that this man named Brian sent me. He says, I'm 6'4" and perceive a few of the rules conflicting. He says, when I am in an aisle seat, I sometimes spill over into the aisle because the person in front of me has their seat back and there is no place for my knees to go except on the outside of the seat, which is in the aisle. I agree that the person in the middle seat should have rights to both of the armrests. And that's something I want to cover with you, because the person in the middle gets the armrests. The person in the window seat has the best view. The person in the aisle seat has more breathing space and the ability to get up first in the event of an emergency. So the armrests are about the only thing the middle person gets. Anyway, he says, I agree that the person in the middle seat should have rights to both of the armrests, but that forces me to shift my body to the right, and my shoulder and arms are somewhat outside the seat and in the aisle. He says he does try to fly comfort class, which will give him more room. However, when having short flights, he's thinking that the person in front of me can go easy, laying the seat back because it's such a short flight. Well, you can't guarantee that people around you will follow the rules, or they'll recline or not recline. So he's just presuming that on a shorter flight, it's okay if he puts his feet out. So I would say you just need to plan. And then he says one other comment. I wish that people should check their bags. There is a lot more wrong with carrying your own luggage on other than being able to lift it yourself. It is so disruptive. If that rule was in place, then the airline should not charge for the first bag. Okay. We all know that, and more fees are getting imposed on travelers because airlines are cutting back. And of course, everybody's got to make a dime. But I believe that when you travel, you should pack your manners with you and be patient and arrive the airport early. You know that you could encounter unexpected delays. And if you've never been to a particular airport, you don't know how far it is from the parking lot to the gate. So you have to plan accordingly. And that means that you not only arrive 2 hours early. I mean, if you can, that's great. On international flights, I think it's 3 hours. But this gives you time to decompress, to get something to eat or drink, to check in, to maybe check with the gate agent and get a better seat, to just relax, so that if there is a delay, and we all know that that's highly probable, that at least your mindset is in a better place versus having to rush around. And I know traffic and all of that can get in the way, but if you can possibly help it, arrive 2 hours prior to the flight, and that gives you time to relax. I always depend on the 5 P's. Prior planning prevents poor performance in life and in work. For those of you just joining us, welcome. I want to share with you my free ebook, Master Your Mingleability. It's available on my website, etiquetteexpert.com. All you have to do is go to my website and scroll down to the very, very bottom, and you'll see it there. I also have a cool quiz that you can take to find out how much you do or do not know about etiquette. Take the Etiquette quiz. And again, I also welcome your comments and your questions. So let's see, does anybody else have a comment? Okay. So Patsy says, pack your manners. Absolutely. So many of us forget to do that. I think that's really all the time we have. And again, if you have not checked out the article on Fox News Digital, I will include a link in the comments, and you can click on it, and you can leave a message on their website. And I think they're up to about 2,000 comments now. So that's crazy. It's a really, really hot topic. So I hope you join me next time, next Tuesday at 2 p.m. I know many of you have very, very busy lives, and I appreciate the fact that you even showed up today. And come back next week. And if you have any questions in the meantime, just send them to me. So thanks so much, and have a beautiful Tuesday.